started. If you're ready. Yeah. Okay, good. I think we should get started. So, welcome all of you to this installment of the Delta on the Move lecture series here at the Hong Kong Institute for the Humanities and Social Sciences. I'm Bassam Moazin, I'm one of the conveners of the series. So for our last session for this year, we're very happy to welcome back to the Institute Professor Taomo from the National University of Singapore, where she is based now. I think she's well known to most of you here, so I won't spend too much time introducing her and give her all her prizes and occasions that would take up way too much time. So I'll try to be brief. But Professor Zhou is now associate professor in the Department of Chinese Studies and Dean's Chair in the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences at the National University of Singapore. I think many people here will know her first book, Migration at a Time of Revolution, an award-winning book, of course, has had quite an impressive and important impact in the field. And she's now working on her second book, which is already which is under contract with Stanford University Press, and it is entitled "Made in Shenzhen: A Global History of China's First Special Economic Zone." And I believe today she's also going to talk to us about part of that book project. Her talk today is entitled "The Special Zone Currency: Shenzhen's Monetary Experiment and China's Foreign Exchange Reform." And the format of the talk is as usual. Professor Zhou is going to talk for around 50 minutes, and then we'll have plenty of time for a Q&A. If you're here in the audience, you can just ask your questions as usual. If you are online, joining us online, please use the Q&A button in Zoom to submit your questions, and then I will read them out during the Q&A period. But I don't want to take up any more time, so please join me in welcoming Professor Zhou.
Thanks so much, Gassan, for the generous introduction. I'd like to thank Gassan and John for inviting me back, and thank you all for coming here. As I just mentioned, I was really starstruck when Professor Liang and Professor Su came, and thank you for everybody who was in the audience, for friends who came to see me talk. Okay, so I'm going to start with an anecdote. So this is early 1980s, and our guy, so this guy named Zhou-Special, he treat a visiting friend for a meal at a well-known restaurant in Shenzhen. So when is Mr. Zhou, not related to me, when he went to pay, he was informed by the server that the restaurant didn't accept the renminbi he took out from his pocket. Hong Kong dollar or foreign exchange certificate only. So the staff at the restaurant explained that their boss was a Hong Kong businessman who invested Hong Kong dollar in the restaurant. Since it was very difficult for the businessman to convert the RMB back to Hong Kong dollar, he required everybody to pay in Hong Kong dollar directly. So FEC, foreign exchange certificate, we'll explain later, is a kind of special form of currency the Chinese government issued for foreign visitors, as well as for Hong Kong, Macau, so-called compatriots. So it was an embarrassing, if not humiliating moment for Zhou, because he was not only reliant on RMB as his sole income, but he actually was Shenzhen's deputy mayor in charge of economic affairs. So between 1980 and 1985, during Shenzhen's early days as a special economic zone, or SEZ, three currencies circulate simultaneously. So the RMB, the foreign exchange certificate, and Hong Kong dollar. While the RMB was the sole legal tender, it was highly unpopular due to its inconvertibility. Despite being officially banned, FEC and Hong Kong dollar were essential for obtaining goods and services in the SEC. So to do everything, basically to buy imported goods like milk powder, electric appliances, luxury items such as American cigarettes, to access services such as taxis, or to go to karaoke bars, RMB was useless, right? You have to have Hong Kong dollar. Hong Kong dollar was the king. So in 1985, Hong Kong South China Morning Post conducted a survey just on the street, where they randomly interviewed like 54 people, including waitresses and as well as hawkers. So the results showed that everybody is unhappy with this tri-currency situation. So basically, 36% favor restoring RMB as the dominant currency. 26% supporting making Hong Kong dollar the national currency because it's internationally convertible. 26% supported a new SEC exclusive currency for Shenzhen. So this is the main topic of our discussion today. Between 1981 to 1985, PRC policymakers conducted research and prepared for introducing a special economic zone currency, which I call is SEC currency. So this proposed currency was to basically expel the Hong Kong dollar, which had become Shenzhen's de facto dominant currency, overshadowing the RMB. So the proposal sparked heated debates among the Chinese economists, policymakers, foreign advisors from Japan. Despite extensive preparation, the plan was shelved ultimately in 1985. So the question is, right, in hindsight, whether the SEC currency should have been issued, is it obvious it wouldn't have worked, right? Like this Chinese scholar who basically argued that all of these debates and preparations seem meaningless, right? There's nothing we can draw from it. It only showed that the thinking of the policymakers and economists during the early reform era was very limited. They don't understand how monetary policy in the market environment should work, right? So the question that I want to ask in this presentation is that, was it obvious that these practitioners and economists, they were short-sighted, right? They only highlight the limited thinking and limited understanding about the market. To answer these questions, I examined documents from the Bang County and Shenzhen Municipal Archives, as you can see John there, as well as academic writings by economists and memoirs by policymakers, as well as Hong Kong newspapers. So to introduce my research, I'd like to focus on 4 quotes from all these documents I examined, I find out in the sources. So let's look at the first quote. Hong Kong dollar omnipotent, right? So officially, basically in socialist border town of Bang County is the geographical predecessor of Shenzhen. Hong Kong dollar was super popular among the local residents, and they call Hong Kong dollar omnipotent. Hong Kong dollar was actually officially banned when the Chinese Communist Party took over Bao'an, but the borderland people actually use it openly. So one report suggests that even at local weddings and funerals, the Bao'an people wrap Hong Kong dollar in red and white envelope as gifts. So the question is why Hong Kong dollar circulated widely even after the communists took over. So I argue that by earning, holding, and trading Hong Kong dollar, the Bao'an residents were actually resisting against the PRC state. Which part of policy were they resisting against? It's the policy of turning this China-Hong Kong border into a mechanism to generate foreign exchange exclusively for the state. So historically, as you can see, the relationship between Bao'an and Hong Kong. Bao'an has been a hinterland for Hong Kong, supplying Hong Kong with raw materials, and Hong Kong, on the other hand, export consumer goods up north. Under state socialism, the cross-border trade came under the tight control of the central government. So instead of selling their products privately on the Hong Kong market as they did in the past, peasants, fishermen, oyster farmers, they were required by the PRC state to turn in their products for state-organized exports. So these state-owned import-export companies would procure all these products at a fixed price, including oysters and also like Chinese medicine herbs, as Calvin studied, right? These will be procured at fixed price, but they will be sold at a much higher price in Hong Kong market. So meanwhile, Bang County suffered from chronic shortages of daily consumer goods. The PRC state prioritized the supply of these commodities to urban areas as well as for export to accumulate foreign exchange. So due to border closure, the Bao'an residents, they couldn't just freely go purchase these consumer goods from Hong Kong. And the socialist state's excessive extraction caused mass exodus in the border town. The outward migration prompted local authorities to experiment with individualized duty-free cross-border trade in 1961. So as I mentioned, we're coming back. So I presented the research about this Use Hong Kong to Construct Bond scheme back at Hong Kong U back in 2021. So this mini reform of 1961 allowed local residents to directly sell economic crops to Hong Kong in exchange for items that are in short supply in Shenzhen. So technical speaking, if you look at the term, this is a barter trade program. But in reality, the local authority actually allow residents to bring back Hong Kong dollar in cash. See, 1962, the Bang County government stipulated a liberal currency management policy, which basically allow individuals and production team to deposit and withdraw Hong Kong dollar freely. The liberal border and foreign currency policy initiated by Bond officials offered these residents kind of a semi-legal way to use and earn Hong Kong dollar in the socialist border. But this mini reform soon became stymied by radical policies. And in 1963, there was a new directive which basically banned the circulation of foreign currency in the frontier areas. So whereas the government's border and foreign currency policies fluctuated, so illegal migration as well as smuggling remain a constant feature of the everyday life in the socialist mother tongue. So basically human trafficking kind of migration syndicate as well as smuggling, they consistently generate Hong Kong dollar. So the question is then where do bond people put these Hong Kong dollar, right? Where did the money go? So a Bang County government report about the situation in the border town of Saptokville. So this is a settlement divided in half, where half go to British, another half go to Chinese. So this report suggests that even during the liberal period, when Hong Kong dollar actually was allowed to be deposited, the PRC banks mechanically refused accept foreign currency savings. Why? Because they fear that they don't have enough foreign currency to pay the interest. So as a result, because of the lack of foreign currency financial services from the PRC side of the border, the Hong Kong credit unions and private bankers, they benefit. So besides saving their money in the banks, like human trafficking syndicates or smugglers, they sometimes also use the Hong Kong dollar in Hong Kong as startup capital for businesses, such as coffee shops and restaurants. Okay, now let's move to the second quote. As long as you have Hong Kong dollar, it doesn't matter if you have RMB or not. So let's first look at how reform changed the economic mechanism at a border. So basically, before early 50s, it was free movement across the border. Under state socialism, basically state has total control over export import. So all the foreign exchange profits generated from state organized export will go to the state. So under the Use Hong Kong to Construct Borders Bao'an scheme, basically the local peasants and fishermen were in principle allowed to trade on the sideline of the planned economy. However, the profit they gain, right, from foreign exchange is neglectable compared to what the state took from them. So the reform in the opening actually signaled the end of a highly extractive border mechanism and the beginning of a more inclusive economic institution, which encourage popular participation in international trade and also allow individuals to profit from global commerce. As you can see from here, in 1979, for the first time, the local production team actually can return 40% of the foreign exchange profit they earned. So, but for ordinary bonders, right, 1979, you don't know what's going to happen under reform, and suddenly the Cultural Revolution is over. This kind of easing of political atmosphere actually emboldened many to emigrate. So in 1979, 1980, Shenzhen experienced a massive wave of illegal emigration. So local statistics show that over 50% of the local residents wanted to flee to Hong Kong. Many succeeded. In 1980, the year when the Shenzhen Special Economic Zone was created, there were only 330,000 residents left. And most of them are actually elderly, children, women, or those who are sick. According to an official report by the Shenzhen Authority, as of 1979, more than 60,000 people from Shenzhen illegally migrated to Hong Kong, The number of Shenzhen diaspora, those include former Shenzhen residents who have settled in Hong Kong, Macau, and beyond, exceed 200,000. In 1980, Shenzhen was an externally embedded society in the sense that its diasporic population was equivalent to 80% of the existing population, existing local population. So while the 330 residents locally were unable to form an effective labor force, the more than 200,000 Shenzhen diaspora enabled the city to attract capital from abroad in the forms of remittances and investment. In 1978, Shenzhen received 14.4 million USD remittances. This is an almost 5-time increase from 1966. And in 1985, Shenzhen residents hold 200 million Hong Kong dollars. So this is around 2,000 Hong Kong dollars per family. So despite being the only legal tender in the border town, the RMB offered its consumers very limited purchasing capacity, causing a strong sense of relative depreciation and a strong sense of grievances. In 1980, the PRC state basically authorized the SEC to encourage foreign investors, and particularly overseas Chinese and compatriots from Hong Kong and Macau to set up businesses. So the Bank of China Guangdong branch soon started a remittance program. So basically, this program allowed families who had families of those who fled to Hong Kong to purchase very very highly coveted consumer goods in short supply in this domestic market by using remittance certificates or 侨汇证. So the PRC state's welcoming attitude towards the so-called unquote diaspora suggested that these former escapees, they could now leverage their new identity as Hong Kong, Macau compatriots to basically generate economic benefits for themselves and for family members who remain in mainland. Whereas those who stay on labor restlessly under socialism, they continue to suffer from consumer shortage. So one case I saw in the document is like one day a commune member in the Pingshan commune of Shenzhen, he went to the store to buy a soap. And the shop assistant told him that, no, you cannot buy it. You have to use a 侨汇证, a remittance certificate. And he tore up his RMB, threw it in the shop assistant's face and said, if RMB cannot buy anything, what's the use of having it? No wonder everybody's feeling abroad. So the members of another commune, Luofang, they articulate a hierarchical relationship between RMB and Hong Kong dollar. As long as you have Hong Kong dollar, it doesn't matter if you have RMB or not. For cross-border farmers who tend to fuse in the new territory, exchanging Hong Kong dollar they have into RMB was quote unquote like turning live money into dead money. So why would they say so? So let's look at this price difference, right? So 16-inch Huasheng brand electric fan. I don't know how many of you have used it before. So this is actually a PRC product. It was sold as 240 RMB per unit in mainland China, but in Hong Kong, only 170 to 80 Hong Kong dollar, equivalent to 57 RMB. Another very popular product at the time, black and white TV, right? So this was sold 400 RMB in mainland China, whereas in Hong Kong it's just over 500 RMB, which is equivalent to 150 RMB. So the price gap highlight not just like, you know, the kind of wage gap between mainland China and Hong Kong, but also a large disparity in the accessibility and affordability of consumer goods, as well as RMB's fixed exchange and lack of convertibility and mobility. So under state socialism, right, the RMB exchange rate actually was pretty consistent, right, very stable between 1953 to 1971. But this exchange rate actually doesn't reflect the actual purchasing power or the market value of the RMB. But with the breakdown of the Bretton Woods system and depreciation of the US dollar, RMB became overvalued, right? So during the Mao era, the planned economy had a higher tolerance for the overvaluation of RMB rate because there's limited international trade and most of the trading companies were actually state-owned enterprises. They will be subsidized anyway. However, under reform, the situation is very different, right? So international trade become decentralized. So local institutions, local business, local individuals, for them, right, this overvaluation of RMB squeeze out the trade profits and actually discourage them from exporting. So in 1981, to boost individual enterprises' enthusiasm for export, the PRC state actually implemented a dual-track exchange rate system, right? How does it work? So basically, you have two RMB rate, right? So the official rate is $1 to 1.5 RMB, but you have like an internal rate, which is more favorable. That is 2.8 RMB. So basically means that if your enterprise, you earn $1, the internal internal system will give you 2.8 RMB. Initially, this was very good. It incentivized more enterprises to export. However, as we go into the mid-1980s, costs associated with earning foreign currencies through export gradually increased. So in other words, this 2.8 rate will no longer benefit all the exporting enterprises, right? Another issue is that there is a second issue with the China's foreign exchange system. That is, there is no market for foreign capital, right? So if you're an exporting company, you want foreign exchange, you need to go to the managing authority and the Bank of China. This is your only source of foreign capital. If you have surplus or if you have deficit, you could not just directly go to the market, right? There's no mechanism to adjust these imbalances. So the dual-track foreign exchange system created arbitrage opportunities. In Shenzhen, basically in the early days, reselling goods produced in the SEZs or imported from Hong Kong to the mainland, taking advantage of this dual foreign exchange system, generated significantly higher incomes compared to the low returns of export processing. So one very interesting case I saw in the document is about this Zhongtang commune in Dongguan. So this commune, the commune members, they have lots of family in Hong Kong. They accumulated a high cash saving in Hong Kong dollar. So the leadership was very enterprising. They basically exchanged their RMB to Hong Kong dollar at a very favorable rate. Then they decided they're going to invest. So how to invest? They used the Hong Kong dollar to buy 50,000 radios from Xinhua Electronics factory in Shenzhen. And these radios were purchased at the price of 219 RMB per unit, but will be sold at 330 RMB in Guangzhou. So this is a very clever scheme. Unfortunately, it was botched by the local authority. So when the investigator went to the commune member denied any wrongdoing. So like, we don't have any Hong Kong dollar. We have never seen any Hong Kong dollar. So entry-port trade was also, it's usually connected to smuggling, right? Smuggling commodity and as well as smuggling of Hong Kong dollar cash. So in 1984 alone, the Hong Kong custom actually seized 4.8 million Hong Kong dollar, right? So basically travelers hid Hong Kong dollar cash everywhere, right? So in their shoes, in the lining of their clothes, around their waist. And the second problem we talk about, because unable to obtain foreign exchange, they need this for official channels. Shenzhen government agencies and enterprises turn to the black market to adjust their surpluses and deficits. So some entities, they are also very savvy. They became the middle boss who borrowed to lend. So the picture you see, this is Bamboo Garden Hotel. So this is Shenzhen's first 3-star hotel, which is a joint venture between Shenzhen food service company, a state-owned enterprise, and Hong Kong's Miller Group. So what they did is very interesting. They have foreign currency quota. So they borrowed 4.8 million from HSBC. And they decided we're just going to use half of it. The rest, we lend again to 15 different entities to earn extra income. So this is a list of entities engaged in legal trading of foreign exchange in 1981 and 82. So I didn't translate that into English, but for Chinese readers, it wouldn't be difficult to say that there's great irony here. What is the irony? The biggest offenders are, who are they? Shenzhen Municipal Government Planning Committee, the Bao'an County Government, Shenzhen Municipal Government Foreign Trade Bureau, as well as major state-owned enterprises such as China Electronics Export and Import Company, Shenzhen Real Estate Company, and Shenzhen Petroleum Company. So the black market rate they use is wide range from 0.6 all the way to, I think the highest was 4 point something, 4.27. But the official rate actually was between 1.5 and 1.89. So basically, in just the first quarter of 1985, there was more than 148 million exchange on the black market. So to sum up, the dual track rate system incentivized entry-port trade between Shenzhen and inland China, shifting the development of the SEZ from export-oriented industrialization to kind of entry-port trade and limiting its future growth. And meanwhile, right, the lack of foreign exchange market led to overwhelming non-compliance with the central government's foreign exchange regulations. So Beijing's directive was disconnected with the reality in Shenzhen. So in 1985, Shenzhen, the central government sent a special task force to Shenzhen to investigate the foreign exchange black market. That led to suspension and detention of several Shenzhen corporate executives. So when this task force proposed an even longer list of names for arrest to Shenzhen Mayor Li Hao, Li Hao suggested their actions were merely adaptive response to an unreasonable economic system and should not be penalized. It is high time for China to reform its foreign exchange system, and the reform should start in Shenzhen. So now let's go to the third quote of today, which is special zone currency or especially weak currency. So as we mentioned earlier, right? So the dual track exchange rate system and rampant foreign exchange market activities further increase the circulation of Hong Kong dollar across the border. So in 1986, up to 4 billion Hong Kong dollar were circulating in mainland China, according to official estimate. Hong Kong South China Morning Post described Shenzhen as rotting under the assault of Hong Kong dollar. RMB was almost non-circulatory, and municipal and national coffer were suffering. So visitors from other mainland cities to Shenzhen often complained that they could not gain access to about 60% of public spaces in Shenzhen because they charge Hong Kong dollar and they wouldn't even look at RMB. So against state regulations, almost every taxi driver in Shenzhen would be sporting a notice saying Hong Kong dollar only. So to expel Hong Kong dollar, in 1980, the Chinese government introduced the foreign exchange currency, foreign exchange certificate for tourists and other short-term visitors from abroad, as well as compatriots from Hong Kong and Macau. So ironically, the FEC became a favorite within Chinese themselves in the center of a growing currency black market. Calling it funny money, Hong Kong media commented that FEC reduced the country's official currency, the RMB, to a poor cousin and caused untold inconvenience to traders and investors. So the FEC failed to check the circulation of Hong Kong dollar in China. In response, the Chinese government turned to harsh regulatory measures. So crackdown on foreign currency black market in Shenzhen resulted to up to 30 daily arrests in the 1980s. However, these crackdowns didn't have much impact. So one reporter from Hong Kong, he pretended to be a traveler and he went to Shenzhen and he was approached by a dealer, right? So this is what the dealer told him. Unlike Shanghai, Shenzhen is distant, away from the central government. Even a cannon cannot reach here. It's convenient to make a deal. Just get into our car to some remote area or have a touring taxi before we change notes. So crackdown on the black market and issuance of the foreign exchange certificate, neither of these work, right? So it is against this background that Chinese policymakers started to think about a third countermeasure, which is to issue a new convertible money, SEZ currency. So in the following 10 minutes, I will introduce the debate surrounding the SEZ currency along two themes. One is sovereignty, another is market. So economic sovereignty was one of the main reasons for supporters from the SEZ currency. They think, right, the wide use of the Hong Kong dollar is kind of infringement on China's sovereignty and would damage China's reputation. For example, some practitioners were worried that if the Hong Kong dollar were to be used as their circulating currency in the SEZ, it will lead to significant financial risk, right? Some even argue that basically allowing Hong Kong dollar to circulate Shenzhen will be granting all these issuing banks in Hong Kong a substantial interest rate long-term foreign exchange deposit while exposing Shenzhen to the risk of depreciation of Hong Kong dollar. So foreign investors might also inject larger amount of Hong Kong dollar, gain control of Shenzhen's economic lifeline and turning it into a dependent of Hong Kong, both economically and politically. The influx of goods from Hong Kong could disrupt the SEZ market and shift its nature towards a capitalist colony. And more importantly, right, so the issuance of SEZ currency was also intended to as a financial and monetary preparation towards the future reunification of Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan with mainland China. So during a visit to Shenzhen in 1983, Huan Xiang is a very experienced diplomat. He's former charge d'affaires of the PRC to Britain. This is what he said to the leaders in Shenzhen, right? So basically he thinks like, is it far more probable that Hong Kong will use the same currency as Shenzhen, which will be the SEZ currency. If we consider the issuers of the SEZ currency in conjunction with the reclamation of sovereignty over Hong Kong, we wouldn't need to debate whether or not we should issue it. We should focus on how to issue it, right? So Shenzhen officials also echo the central government's emphasis on sovereignty. So Zhou Kang is Shenzhen Municipal Government Secretary General. He said something like, in the coming years, all right, so after Hong Kong returned to China, it will be unacceptable to use a currency bearing the portrait of the British Queen, right? So in the coming years, if we can issue a currency that is even stronger than the Hong Kong dollar, we could build trust among the Hong Kong residents, and the transition will be smoother, will be seamless. So when the Chinese leadership was preparing for the issuance of the SEZ currency, even its physical design was shaped by this consideration for sovereignty or political unification. So the Chinese policymaker initially wanted to use the portrait of, I don't know whether you know them, so these are kind of mythical ancestor of all the Chinese descent, right? Emperor Yan and Emperor Huang, right? However, historical records show that Emperor Yan had long hair and two horns. He looked very wild. So eventually he was canceled, right? The policymakers decided to use the portrait of Emperor Huang. So because that would help unite people from Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan, and overseas Chinese would be beneficial to China's foreign economic relations. Factional disputes also was also reflected in this SEZ currency debates, right? So those are not in favor of reform, seized the opportunity to criticize the monetary pitfalls in the SEZ. So if you think about people who are opposing reform, of course, the financial czar of the PRC, Chen Yun. So when he was talking about SEZ currency with Hu Mu, a main reformer, architect of reform, he said, if each SEZ issues its own currency, the legs of the RMB will go shorter, while the legs of the SEZ currency will go longer, right? So it will really damage the national unity of the RMB. So here we see both the supporter as well as opposer of the SEZ currency evoked sovereignty argument. Let's look at the other theme, which is market. Right, so talking about market, of course, the most important person is Deng Xiaoping, right? So in 1984, Deng Xiaoping, during his inspection trip to the SEZ, he heard about this SEZ proposal from Shenzhen local leaders. So this is what he said. He said our guiding principle, for establishing SEZ was to liberalize. It's not about restricting. That's why the SEZ should have its own currency because RMB couldn't float. Right? Having a special SEZ currency will allow free exchange with foreign currency, which will motivate more foreign investment. So a group of reform-minded economists also emphasize the need for SEZ currency to further expose Chinese economy to the global market. So I'll just briefly summarize a few representatives. So this guy, Wang Zunhu, his argument is very interesting. Of course, he recognized the necessity of an SEZ currency because he thinks China shouldn't revert to its policy of severing economic relations with the rest of the world. And he thinks SCZ in China is different from the SCZs in more capitalist countries, right? So SCZ in China represent a form of what he calls state capitalism, right? So the outward nature of SCZs in China is contradictory with RMB. RMB couldn't function as a global currency. It is inward looking, it's constrained by the planned economic system. It wouldn't support the development of the SCZ. So supporters for the SCZ currency included a group of scholars, as you can see from here, right, from Jinan University, from also Shanghai Academy of Social Sciences, as well as practitioners, right? So researchers based in the Bank of China Guangdong branch. And their views actually kind of varied, right, in terms of technicalities, right? For example, should they be freely convertible, right? Well, should they be floating to what degree, right? So they kind of differ on exchange rate mechanism. But there are two very important shared consensus. First is all of them think, right, there were sufficient foreign reserve to back it up, right? So this foreign reserve will come from PRC state of Guangdong province or the SCZ itself, so that there's sufficient support to ensure the stability and credibility of the SCZ currency. Secondly, they believe in isolation. They all think that, there is kind of border making between the SCZ and the rest of China. SCZ currency will be the sole legal tender of that in Shenzhen, and RMB and foreign exchange certificates will be banned. So those opposing the SCZ currency actually oppose exactly on these 2 points, whether there are enough foreign currency reserve and whether Shenzhen should be isolated from the rest of China. So first and foremost, right, how much money do we need to issue the SCZ currency? So there are different estimations. According to Zhou-Special, the vice mayor, the poor guy whose story we shared at the beginning, he said it was 150 million. But Zhang Yuanyuan, who is an economic professor at Jinan University, according to his research, is 500 million USD, right? So where to get this money? So in 1983, Shenzhen was actually running an annual deficit of 200 million USD. Shenzhen doesn't have the money. Shenzhen needs to ask that money from the central government. But is the Shenzhen government going to give that money to Shenzhen? Like, unlikely, right? So in a commentary entitled Special Zone Currency or Especially Weak Currency, this banker in Hong Kong, Han Zhaozhang, who wrote, without the support, sufficient support from the central government, the newly issued SCZ currency will be fragile. It will be like a newborn needing to survive on vitamins, and the resulting days will be unbearably difficult. This will be an empty currency. So another prerequisite for the SCZ currency was that the zone will be isolated from the rest of China in terms of administration. So Hong Kong media think this is ridiculous, right? How are you going to add a tri-currency system by issuing another currency, right? This will cause monetary problems in monetary relation between Shenzhen with the rest of Guangdong, as well as Shenzhen with the other open coast cities in China. What if all the 14 open cities all want their own currency? Shenzhen, Hong Kong media think we're going back to the 1920s and 30s when it's the warlord era, right? Each of these special economic zones will have their own monetary policy, tax policy, and their own currency. So the person we see here in the picture, this is Saburo Okita. So he's a Japanese economist who served as an advisor to Vice Premier Gu Mu. So he also opposed the launch of the SCZ currency. He believed that since there are already dual parallel exchange system for the RMB, launching a third currency would deviate China from the goal of unifying its monetary system. So now we see arguments from both sides, right, along the theme of sovereignty and market. Now we go to the last quote I want to share today, which is two systems, one market. So in 1986, at a meeting with the Chinese and foreign reporters on the SCZ issue, Vice Premier Gu Mu announced the plan for the SCZ currency have been dropped because the system would have been too complex and would fail to solve the currency problems in other coastal cities. So although the SCZ currency did not materialize, China's currency reform proceeded gradually with two critical steps. The first is to foster capital market development. The second is the ending of the dual foreign exchange system. So let's look at the first step. So China's first foreign currency swap center was established in Shenzhen in 1985. So it kind of provided, basically, as a bold experiment to basically provide a legal channel rather than the black market for all these exporting companies to obtain foreign exchange. It marked the beginning for the liberalization of China's currency. So the center conducted kind of transactions at rates that reflected the supply and demand on the market. The exchange rate for different currency transactions might vary according to the trader's cost of funds. That means enterprises facing higher costs in earning the foreign exchange are allowed to sell their hard currency at a higher price. So according to Wang Xi, this is the governor of Shenzhen branch of People's Bank of China, he said that basically the foreign exchange swap center in Shenzhen was a model for the foreign exchange reform nationwide, because later on the Bank of China allowed this kind of foreign exchange swap center to be established across China, modeling after Shenzhen. And in 1994, finally, right, China unifying the two exchange rates, right? So there's one single market-oriented rate, and the official rate was devalued to align with the market rate. And the foreign exchange market became the main platform for determining the RMB's value. So with the unification of the RMB exchange rate and increasing convertibility of RMB, foreign exchange certificate became redundant and it was abolished in 1955. So its cancellation was part of China's broader economic reform and efforts to integrate into the global economy. So here we are back to our original question. So was it like kind of obvious the SCZ currency wouldn't work? I argue that although Shenzhen did not manage to launch its own fully convertible currency, its successful experience with foreign exchange swap center laid the foundation for further reform in China's foreign exchange system. So more importantly, I want to highlight here at the corner, I hope you see it. That is the most important advocator for the SCZ currency were Shenzhen local leaders. The Shenzhen leaders were pushing for a separate convertible currency like the Hong Kong dollar. And what is their goal? They say it's for the sake of sovereignty, but in their heart, they want to attract more foreign investment and address currency-related issue of economic irregularities in the zone. So if on paper, Shenzhen leaders were advocating the issuers of SCZ currency to help the future assimilation of Hong Kong into the mainland, in reality, they might be thinking about Shenzhen's integration with Hong Kong economically, or to use Deng Xiaoping's word, to make another Hong Kong. So in his memoir, Shenzhen's vice mayor Zhou-Special, he commented that the concept of the SCZ currency was closely tied to the positioning of the SCZ itself. The SCZ currency was connected to this model of development called Freeport model. So the principle of which is opening up the first line and managing the second line. So which are the first line and the second line? The first line is the boundary between China and Hong Kong. And the second line is this boundary between the special economic zone and the rest of China, right? So opening up means that a customer policy allowing the free movement of goods between Shenzhen and Hong Kong, exempting all goods from tariff, except for some special goods such as tobacco, alcohol, luxuries. Opening the first line would make the flow of people and capital more convenient. So managing the second line means that goods crossing the second border, right, this border between the rest of China and Shenzhen, will be subject to nationwide custom tariff regulations. So Zhou-Special, in his memoirs, he argued that SCZ did not adopt the Freeport model, but took a more significant historical mission. That is to serve as the pioneer and testing ground for national reform and open up. The SEC currency never materialized, not because it was impossible, but because it was unnecessary, because Shenzhen found a better development path. Now, is that true, a better development path, or did Shenzhen voluntarily give it up? So in a 1991 report by the General Office of the Shenzhen Municipal Party Committee actually outlined Shenzhen's goal by 1997, the year when Hong Kong returned. By strengthening economic cooperation and market integration between Shenzhen and Hong Kong, the two economies can become closely interconnected. This will create a seamless, multi-level, multifunction transitional link. So basically, Shenzhen want to gradually integrate its market with the Hong Kong market, making it part of the international market, thereby forming two systems, one market. So to achieve this, the Shenzhen municipal government actually advocate for reorganizing the border according to this principle of opening up the first line and managing the second line. After doing so, it will be possible for Hong Kong dollar to circulate in Shenzhen, thereby linking Shenzhen's monetary system to Hong Kong, and Shenzhen can create an economic environment that resembles Hong Kong. So to conclude, Shenzhen's aborted monetary experiment was a pivotal chapter in the history of China's economic reform. The envisioned SEC currency was to facilitate capital flow and foreign investment, as well as to facilitate currency exchange. China drew on the experiment of Shenzhen before making RMB a convertible currency. Although the SEC currency failed to materialize due to immature economic infrastructure, the idea actually served as a prelude to China's foreign exchange reform nationwide. The debates and discussions surrounding it signal the reform-minded scholar and policymakers' aspiration for a market economy and determination to break away from the planned economy. A 1985 report by South China Morning Post observed Shenzhen exists by a process of economic osmosis with Hong Kong. So although maintaining monetary sovereignty by expelling Hong Kong dollar was officially the main motivation for the SEC currency proposal, Shenzhen policymakers might have a hidden agenda that did not fully align with the Beijing leadership. Shenzhen's true aim might have been to erase the border with Hong Kong, creating a seamless connection to global economy. The SEC currency proposal provides a critical insight into the nonlinear trajectory of China's reform. Beneath the abandoned plan lay an alternative vision of development, bold and daring, that is, if realized, might have led to a very different Shenzhen, a very different China, and perhaps a very different global economy. Thank you very much. I look forward to your comments.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Joe, for the talk. Yeah, as I said, we now have time for questions. If you are here, just make yourself known as usual. If you are joining us online, please submit your questions to the Q&A button Zoom, and I will then read them out. Do we have any questions to start with?
We start with comments. Sure. Thank you, Professor Zhou, for an interesting and amazing presentation about contemporary Chinese history. As also a child who grew up in Shenzhen, we really felt the same. And also your story about the RMB seems useless and Hong Kong dollar seems quite useful. I listened to so much similar story from my parents because they also working in Shenzhen and Hong Kong at that time. And actually, I have a question because I also read some archives related to the PBOC, People's Central Bank of China, their discussion about the Shenzhen currency, Shenzhen yuan. I mean, actually, in a very early period, or like say in the early 1980s, the PBOC officials and the scholars seems very positive about creating such a special economic currency. But then they become to more and more say disappointed as such a currency. So, in your opinion, do you think it's because of the pressure from the upper level of government, or do you think it's because of they find it's too difficult to create such a currency in Shenzhen?
Yeah. Thank you so much for the question, Jerry. I think well, I think there are multiple reasons, as I lay out in the presentation, why it didn't work out, right? The economic infrastructure wasn't there, but I'm actually not fully able to answer your question because the document I found, like when the Shenzhen municipal government was still kind of holding on to this vision, right, of kind of economic integration with Hong Kong. That was 1991, so the timing was quite curious from my view because this is post 1989, right, post Tiananmen. And when did that vision became ultimately untenable, right? What triggered, you know, what was the ultimate trigger? What ultimate reason? That I actually don't know, right?
But overall, your argument is quite, persuasive to me because
Thank
based
you.
on the archive I also read and also other primary books I read, it's true that also the Chinese officials in Shenzhen and People's Bank of China, they also want Shenzhen to imitate Hong Kong's economy and create such a system
Right,
for the whole country.
Right. Yeah. I also saw like documents regarding kind of transplanting or translation or translating Hong Kong's legal framework, like some of the legislation to Shenzhen as well. Thank you.
Right, John, please.
Thanks for a great presentation. I've been talking about this for a while, so glad to finally learn from the research. Your entry point is the special economic zone currency. I guess what we're hearing is what we're exploring is why it's necessary, why people thought it's necessary, and why it didn't happen in the end. The context is, or actually what we're exploring more is the role of Shenzhen and Hong Kong in connecting China with the rest of the world in the capitalist world, right? So I wonder the starting point of the story was not what the heck was the RMB? Did it even work? Right?
Yeah.
In that sense, it didn't work because China's not using it to trade with the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And it didn't work internally either because it was still very much a barter system that you just described to us, right? So the official rate didn't matter. The best slide that I saw of that earlier period was the fan and the TV. The real rate was the two prices in Hong Kong dollars and RMB. And usually I would expect a linear relationship, but it was not. The cheaper it was, then the easier it is to get it. The more expensive it is, then it's a different story. So that was quite a funny relationship that I didn't quite expect. So then they invented the foreign exchange certificates, which was supposed to be an answer before the special currency, right? And I think that is somewhat more related to the first line, second line that you're talking about.
Right.
The withdrawal of that was the elimination of the second line.
Yes.
And instead of doing what they were going to do with the foreign exchange certificate with the second line, they actually eliminated that and kept the Hong Kong dollar. So the Hong Kong dollar, in a way, took the place of the special economic zone currency.
Yes.
Much of the discussion happened at a time when they were trying to figure out how to unify Hong Kong. This is the 1980s we're talking about. And they didn't want to have Queen Elizabeth's icon on the dollar bills anymore. They don't anymore. But then how did the currency survive? And how is it still very much part of the Chinese currency? I think it's something that, even though I've worked on it, I still don't understand. Is the RMB a functional currency? If so, how? I mean, the end point is what we've learned from the economic zone currency became instructive for China's monetary system, but I don't understand the Chinese monetary system right now. I understand the Hong Kong monetary system, right? The offshore thing and the RMB is not convertible. In a way, we are still stuck in the 70s and the early 80s with the RMB. But what has remained constant is Hong Kong dollar. Right? Is that the Hong Kong dollar is becoming something, or has become something that the CCP is comfortable with. So we don't need the SEC currency. Right? So I wonder if you can help us triangulate that a little bit. to think about the larger context of what China wanted to do and how it has survived without the currency that was proposed in the 80s.
Yeah. As always, John always like like pick up the most critical points. I totally.
Not just like money.
Yeah. Totally. I think that's the issue, right? It's an incomplete reform. So this debate about SCC currency actually is a debate about the limits of reform. How far can we go? Could we allow Shenzhen to truly become a capitalist economy, right? The answer, like as the vice mayor wrote his memoir, is no, but the whole country is going to gradually reform, but it's an incomplete reform, right? And exactly, it's because of the existence of a Hong Kong dollar, so that the RMB could survive today is with this incomplete reform. Right? I don't have enough financial knowledge to answer the question about the current RMB, the offshore issue, exchange rate issue. But I totally agree. This is almost like a testing ground for how far financially the reform could go ahead.
If I follow up, I just feel that the proposition here in the mid-80s was for different Shenzhen based on the description. It was a Shenzhen that was not developed industrially, economically. There was basically not much there. I mean, they were running a deficit. They didn't have infrastructure or financial system. Yet they wanted it to be a currency center.
Yes.
And they decided we cannot do it anymore. And let's leave it to Hong Kong.
Right.
So in that sense, it's also a negotiation of what Hong Kong was supposed to be. And what has since happened is that what they didn't expect based on the currency reform was that Shenzhen was more successful economically, not monetarily. Not in the financial sense of a financial market, but as an economic center.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then that has certainly spread to the rest of China. Right. So I wonder if you agree with that assessment based on the reading of the material.
I would agree, but I think many of those like the memoirs of all these former financial sector policymakers, they John heard me present and read my sloppy drafts, 5 times. Like I had another chapter about the Shenzhen Stock Exchange, right? So very similar people appear in the scene on stock exchange of foreign currency, and they have this sense of grievance. That is, Shenzhen had the potential to become the financial center of China, but the central government decided to assign that role to Shanghai. So, for example, like the first centralized national foreign exchange swap center was ultimately set in Shanghai, not in Shenzhen. Then Shenzhen started it. And similarly, these officials argue that actually the first stock exchange started in Shenzhen, but it started without official approval. It was behind the scene, right? They even didn't take the red cloth off that plate. But on paper, Shanghai was the first. So it could be, I think between Shenzhen and Hong Kong, there's kind of historical sediment, right? Hong Kong had always been this shiny colonial entropole, whereas Shenzhen had been the backwater. But between Shenzhen and Shanghai, I think there is kind of purpose national, there is historical reason, but also like kind of is to a certain degree by design. I guess my response to your question is like, to what degree was that by design? You mentioned like the economic success of Shenzhen and Hong Kong as the financial center.
And I'm not an expert like John for financial stuff, but I'm just curious. You mostly talk about how China's government, Shenzhen government is to use. I'm wondering, do you see anything from the colonial state in Hong Kong?
Oh, yeah.
So you possibly mentioned like some bank in Hong Kong quite skeptical about currency experiment.
Right.
And I'm wondering, is there discussions in colonial state or government, even American government?
Yeah. I need to do more research to answer your question, Calvin. Probably need to borrow help from Charles to dig into the Hong Kong PR. But the overwhelming sense is that, interestingly, I think most of the advisors, whether it's Hong Kong or advisors from Japan, also from Singapore, like Singapore Singapore scope I think it's not possible. It's not feasible. That's the economic architect of Singapore, so the planner of the drone industrial zone in Singapore. So it's a very different set of logic from the domestic opposers such as Chen Yun. They just think like China did not have enough foreign reserve to do it. It's gonna fall, and if the central government is going to make it work, it needs to channel more money into Shenzhen, and then basically the rest of China will be channeling money to the SEZ, and otherwise this currency will just be cannibalized, to use John's word, by Hong Kong dollar. But thanks for that point. I should do one. Yes.
Thank you for giving me. Well, I actually met the person who designed the Hong Kong notes.
Oh.
Met him recently. Jolly man in his 90s who came to Hong Kong in the 1960s and 1972.
Who is the designer, man?
Henry China.
Oh.
The Empress Museum.
Oh, interesting.
And he was the one who designed the banknotes false management in from 72 to 83. And now even the red banknote used. So maybe next time when I see Henry again, I tell him that to go over the
wonderful. Yeah.
design.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and that really makes me think about the different lives of the continuous lives of the money and the notes, and how they transfer and circulate in the story that you just told us. And then of course it got scaled like this SEZ and got straight. But I was thinking, because you had that slide about the design, the proposed design of the currency. So I was thinking like because the Hong Kong dollar is always designed, and any designer in general always design things about Hong Kong, and there's always like East meets West, and then we think about our identity as this intersection between Western and Chinese cultures. So in another universe, when this SEZ currency comes into existence, would it radically automate our relationship to money and our relationship to this economic society? Like, would we be more Chinese? The characteristic associated with Chinese, like more frugal, or more like less risk averse, or like more savings, less investment, that kind of mentality. Like, would it also change the social and cultural lives between the borders?
Well, that's a fantastic question. I think it speaks back to John's earlier point about this kind of cross-border, like what is RMB now, right? So now is the digitalization of the RMB. So I guess in mainland China, you hardly see the physical cash anymore. I guess to use let me see. I guess your question is, will that generate a different kind of economic sentiment, right? In reform era in Shenzhen, I don't know how that will relate back to the currency issue, but in terms of stock market, economic sentiment was a huge part. It was like huge speculation, but not irrational speculation, right? So this idea of Shenzhen being a plain slate where you can actually, achieve social mobility. So that's the economic sentiment. In terms of how currency, a different form of currency, can generate a different kind of economic sentiment. One thing I would say is, I don't know. John actually did an experiment, right? You managed to transfer the RMB to me digitally, right? So I do think in terms of current plans, the Chinese government is trying to promote more kind of cross-border mobility of money, but it's tightly supervised, tightly controlled, supervised mobility, right, to serve the state's purpose, right? And digitalization reinforces the state's control and surveillance, I would say. But I think that would be a very interesting research topic, right? Yeah.
Can offer a story on this second point. I just looked it up and it started issuing. And I think it's good art. I think this is good to local shop. And I was buying whatever. At that time, the Hong Kong dollar was trading a premium to the RMB, and they said, 120 Hong Kong dollars, right? Took out my Hong Kong dollars. And then someone said, not this $100. What, you want the RMB $100? It's not good. Well, I'll be glad to trade for you because that's less than this $100 Hong Kong. What they did not want was my $100 Hong Kong dollar bill issued by the Bank of China. They wanted my HSBC issued Hong Kong dollar bill.
They want that Henry Simon.
I don't think they actually like the design. They didn't trust the issuing bank, even though the Hong Kong dollar bill was obviously exchangeable. It made no difference in my mind. But the minds of people in the special economic zone at that time is the credit worthiness of whatever that design stands for. It's a bank thing.
Yeah. Yes, Helen. Yeah.
I know he's an English guy. He actually designed that logo for HSBC. But anyway, I think the cultural aspect is very important. You kept mentioning about the infrastructure that Shenzhen lacks.
Right.
Cheap. And I think infrastructure actually is not just hardware.
Yeah.
You're really referring to institutions.
Yes.
Cultural infrastructure.
Yeah.
And so on. And social infrastructure.
Yeah.
And in a sense, it's a very different attitude about money and
Yes.
value, actually, between sort of stakeholders in China, and then also stakeholders in Hong Kong and the world. And so I think unless these kinds of differences in the cultural meaning of money and values, it's actually sort of brought closer together. I think we'll always get this problem of having not just the SEC currency being pushed. In fact, it just that there's issues about law. I mean, John's issue is very, very relevant here because the banknote is legally and legitimately issued by the Bank of China.
Right.
But who's going to trust that? Right?
Exactly.
The world trusted the Bank of China, but the Chinese people themselves will. I mean, so it's that kind of cultural, historical, institutional confidence in the entire finance system. Now, I think we when you were at Yale, a couple of months ago, when we were talking about the stock
exchange.
Right? I mean, 1998. The Shanghai Stock Exchange that Alan Hertz wrote about.
Oh, right. Trading crowds,
Trading crowd. It went up back in 92, 93. Went up and then it crashed almost.
Exactly.
Because the experiment for the Shanghai Stock Exchange was basically a state-led mobilization. Including speculation. Of supposedly a capital market. Right? And I think Shenzhen has always been very much that way. It's a state project from beginning to end. It still is. Right? And so manufacturing, you can do that with a kind of very heavy hand state influence. That's a very different matter.
Exactly.
Right? Because it's not just RMB versus Hong Kong dollar. And Hong Kong dollar behind it is the US dollar. So I think there's a lot more. But I think, going to that idea of infrastructure, I think we can go very far.
Right. Thank you so much, Helen. That's such an inspiring point. Yes, broadening the concept. I see in the back, Professor Yang Fan is writing about like Shenzhen as a media infrastructure city for the global south. So lots of scholars broadening the concept of infrastructure. I also like to pick up the point you mentioned about like this is a state project and state mobilization. So that's a very important point in Shenzhen's reform in the sense that the Chinese government actually was using the tools of the planned economy for mass mobilization in order to build a market. So it's kind of contradictory and ironic. But there are limits, exactly as you said, like in other realms, for example, they use the People's Liberation Army Engineering Corps to build infrastructure in Shenzhen, urban infrastructure. So all the infrastructure you could imagine to forge a capitalist economy, like roads, railroads, these are built by the People's Liberation Army soldiers. But how far could a state go using this arbitrary mobilization force in terms of finance, right? There's a limit, right? And just a funny anecdote, actually, yeah, Professor Xu was there when I presented the stock exchange story. So this is 1992 when Shenzhen had this stock wild. So the city government decided overnight, okay, we're going to issue 5 million more stock, like basically lottery tickets for people to buy new stocks. They had to find paper to print 5 million tickets overnight. So where did the paper come from? These are actually the paper originally reserved, stockpile, to print the SCZ currency. So because the SCZ currency didn't work out, so they became stock certificates. Yeah.
I mean, for finance, it's the softest of the soft.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it does involve law and culture and people's ideas and values.
Credits, yeah.
Credit is very, it's that trust, human kind of trust. I mean, like Chinese services, services in China can be so profitable, but it really hasn't really taken on as much as wanted. Is because that basic lack of trust in service transactions. I know Tangible can tell you that. He's been complaining about that for years. But that lack of trust in relationships, that just make a very profitable service industry in China not workable.
Right.
And so I think if you go along this line, you're very profitable.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Prof. Su.
Can I ask
Yes,
a question?
Gazam.
I'm still sort of surprised that how far the central government actually let first the Hong Kong dollar circulate, and then they would actually entertain having this SCZ currency. From what you tell me, it seems to me that what you're saying is that in the end it kind of failed for practical reasons, the infrastructure and so on. But I wonder whether there wasn't also just fear. I mean, I think it was Chen who quoted the principle of the good currency drives out the bad currency.
Yes.
There must have been, weren't there people on the more conservative side in the central government who were just against it for that reason? And connected to that, one thing I want to ask is, how far did the Hong Kong dollar actually circulate in Guangdong beyond Shenzhen? Because I guess my fear, if I'm in the central government, would be, okay, if we have this convertible new currency in Shenzhen or in other special economic zones, and then it spreads beyond the special economic zones and drives out the RMB. That would be, at least if I'm interested in keeping the RMB alive as it is, then that would be seemingly something rather dangerous. So I don't know whether you know anything about that.
The circulation
beyond, yeah. Because I remember, John and I, John has done some work on that, and we've talked about, in previous times how far the
Hong Kong
dollar circulate, and I know it from other foreign issued currencies in the sort of Republican period. They all circulate way beyond the treaty ports.
That's a fantastic question. The first one, I need to do more research, but based on the secondary sources I read, so right around, so in the early 1950s, when the communists established authority in Guangdong, there was like a expel Hong Kong dollar movement. So basically, Hong Kong dollar was dominating. I think you heard me present last year. This time was in Shenzhen market town, right? So there was, how to say, like during the Treaty Port era, of course, Hong Kong dollar came in because of the trade, and then during that time, remember I presented on kind of the inflation, hyperinflation during the waning years of the Kuomintang rule, right? So that hyperinflation further increased the creditworthiness of Hong Kong dollar. So Hong Kong's dollar would stand. So everybody would come basically hold Hong Kong dollar. So as a result, when the communists took over, Hong Kong dollar was the king, right? The supreme currency. So how did the Chinese government took over? So I think I shared 2 articles with John, like they're kind of Guangzhou-based historian who wrote about it. And they describe the strategy as kind of using both the tools of market and regulation. So one strategy they use is that like the government is going to stockpile consumer goods. So they decided that to make renminbi work, you have to have enough consumer commodities, what they call daily necessities, in order to build confidence. Another thing is that the Bank of China will purchase Hong Kong dollar at the highest rate possible on the market so that people will exchange for RMB. And then there are regulatory procedures such as crackdown on underground money changers and remittance houses. So that's how allegedly RMB was, confidence in RMB was built in Guangdong. However, I need to do more research to see whether this was true, because based on what I knew in Shenzhen, RMB was always a question, right? Like,
Yeah, so that's why I'm.
yeah.
So it's so popular in Shenzhen, then why not?
Exactly, and like in all documents, like all these activities is all registered. Denomination was always in Hong Kong dollar. So I need to do more research. The second question, what's the economic term for that? Like the good money will always drive
There's a
up.
particular law.
I think
Russian law.
Russian law. It's Russian law. I think that goes back to John's question. So Chinese government ultimately decided this is going to be a gradual reform, right? They are not going to make RMB convertible instantly because they couldn't take the risk. So that's why they kind of lean back to this gradual approach with Hong Kong dollar as almost like a crunch. That's my sense. But again, I think I need to do more research on that.
I guess the point is more like, if you have this new currency that is
right,
then that might again spread beyond Shenzhen and then
and also all the special zones will want to have their own.
Yeah, but even beyond the special economic zones, and then if you can't control it that well, and then that might be
right. So ultimately, it's a weakness of the RMB.
Yeah.
Right. I agree, definitely.
So the Hong Kong dollar circulated deep in China because up till 1935, both the Hong Kong dollar and the Chinese dollar was converted into silver. So whenever you can convert it, it's worth some money.
Yeah.
But when you have restriction of movement of people, and money cannot circulate that quickly, then that convertibility dies off basically. But it's interesting, the article that you shared with me, Taomo, that the convertibility became one not into silver, but into consumer goods.
Yes.
Right. So that the currency is still not worth a whole lot, but the underlying purchasing power in things that I want. So that was an interesting observation of that article. And on the other front, where you said they want to buy back all the Hong Kong dollars at its higher rate as they could, there's a cost to it. That's the KMT regime, right? Keep printing money so it can suck up your own currency. That's only so much the CCP can do because that cheapens the RMB when it's trying to shore it up.
Exactly.
So that's the counter balance there.
Yeah.
That gets to be quite tricky. I have something else to add, but I just in terms of those two scenarios is quite interesting.
Right, right. Definitely. So the purchasing power is like that's a very good observation. It's always there, right? It's like Hong Kong dollar is exactly. It's not just how much it can be converted, but Hong Kong dollar, I think in Shenzhen was almost a status symbol, right? It's this connecting point between a socialist economy where everybody is constantly under consumer shortage and this free capitalist market where you have like access to all kinds of colorful, colorful variety of affordable consumer goods.
I know what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Circulation ran deep into the CCP of Hong Kong dollar because they don't want you to have it, but they want to have all of it.
Yes, yes,
right?
yes.
So essentially,
yeah.
Accounts. So before 1973, holding Hong Kong dollars is the same as holding British pounds.
Yeah.
After 1973, is the same as holding US dollars, and they needed that to survive in the world of economic transactions.
Exactly.
So it is not that the dollar bill was circulating or not, but it was unit of accounts for China, for the rest of the world anyway. But who's keeping track of that account? I don't know. Or maybe Philip Tai can tell us.
Yeah, that's really well said. Yes. So, how we have going? Yeah.
Fania, I studied at University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I'm a cultural studies person. So I have one common slash anecdote, but also maybe as well. But one comment is actually about this cultural text, Blossom Shanghai, that was hugely
Oh,
popular.
yeah.
And Helen Sue's question, and that text actually kind of offered a really interesting mirror of what you said about the emphasis shifting from Shenzhen to Shanghai. So I don't know if it's worth checking out. Because Shenzhen was very subtle and almost absent presence in that text, but very interesting mirror of Shanghai. Production. So yeah, very maybe worth checking out for you. My question was actually also related to another anecdote. I'm based in Chinese University of Hong Kong right now as a Beijing scholar, so I've been kind of just exploring interacting with people. And sometimes I encounter folks from mainland traveling here complaining at times about still the circulation of cash when they are currency. And on the other hand, I also encounter people perhaps in the US and having spent some time in mainland feeling that, it's kind of nice that the local economy seems to still operate through cash transactions so much. There's a different kind of sentiment related to that. So I was wondering, because we were kind of talking about currency creation, often thinking abstract as a form of circulation, but I'm also curious about the different mediums in which they appear and what that means for different transactions and
That's
actual like digitalization.
right. The physicality. You mean the physicality of money? I need to think more about it. Physicality of money. Oh, definitely should check out Blossom about that Shanghai Shenzhen comparison. Medium of money, physicality of money. Can I think a little bit more about that? But that's a very good question. I think it still goes back to the question of how much state presence we want in our economic lives, right? I don't know whether that comment you have, like the contrast between Americans and mainlanders about this cash economy, can be applied in this context. Or like the Bitcoin, right? Whether right? We want to totally escape state surveillance and state control. Also, like I guess it's also like aspect of social meaning of money in it. I'll read up more literature. Thank you for the note. Let's see.
Funny observations.
Mm.
It's by the, it's sort of in response to this
Right,
last question about how much the foreign currency certificate notes circulated beyond
Right,
special
right.
events. I was already working as rural China.
Oh, yeah.
And then in the 80s, when for a very short time, we were actually those 5-week drive
Oh, yeah.
and so on. It's quite fascinating because, of course, I didn't walk Shenzhen. There's no Shenzhen then.
Yeah.
Period, right? It was just a tiny little market town with a very, thriving food inn, where lefties like us would go with our students to buy the books of Marx, Lenin, and Marx. That's about it. But in the far of the delta on the west side, Nanhai, Guangzhou, Foshan, Nanhai, Zhongshan, Shunde, and all the way down to Jiangnan, is a very different world, right? And in the 70s, I have to say, even then, there's very little to buy.
Oh,
I mean, because the country was very poor.
Yes.
And so we were always using the renminbi because there's no need for China, for
Hong Kong dollar,
currency. There's nothing to buy anyway. So we were using renminbi very, very much. I mean, 90%. And the renminbi at the time was like 100 Hong Kong dollars exchanged for like 23 renminbi. I mean, the renminbi rate was
very high. Well, that's an interesting contrast. Yeah.
It didn't matter because there's nothing we can use the dollars.
Right.
But then it really changed in the 80s. The Kaifang, when suddenly even ritual money that you burn for your ancestors it makes a lot of difference if you have the Hong Kong dollar. And so the material conditions of society is a lot more to buy. There's then the temptation to get different kinds of currency, to get the different kinds of goods. Right? And I still remember it was in the early 80s, when the Huayhui Yuan began to be used. I visited an aunt of mine whom I've never seen, an elderly aunt. And during that time in the village, sort of off the coast of Jiangning, I gave her $100 of the Huayhui Yuan. And the poor old lady was looking at it as if I was giving her some fake money, right? Very uncomfortable. And then I remember the driver who took me there, and in Cantonese it said, "Ah, Paul, don't use, Granny, don't use that $100 to buy soy sauce. I beg you, because that already in Xinhui County and in Jiangmen, you can use that money to get like TVs or something in the foreign overseas Chinese shops. And so, the tribal was very nervous about, don't use it to buy soy sauce. Right? And so all these things were happening. And we were talking about the cultural, historical meanings of money and goods and all that. And so I think, in your study on the currency and all that, it's still very, to me, it's still very hot
Kapdong, yeah.
down, government kinds of very narrowly defined kind of currency in the abstract. But if you suddenly put all these kind of few empirical stuff on the map, it's so it's so multidimensional that it's fascinating. Actually put your theme.
Right, definitely.
But the problem, the West River Delta and the East River Delta
It's
are
very
two
different.
different
Yeah,
worlds.
very different.
And Shenzhen dominated the East, but not the West.
Right.
That answers Gassan's question. Taomo didn't circulate that.
Didn't circulate.
I guess the
to
Chinese economy is so demonetized that
Yeah,
no currency actually worked.
demonetized.
Yeah, but later, that would be, yeah.
Foreign exchange actually was, only the state could obtain foreign currency.
Right,
And Guangdong is a very important province because that's the place where foreign goods could get out from China.
Yeah.
And that's where the soy sauce coming in.
Just go slow down.
Yeah.
That's the true currency. Soy sauce.
For the state only.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
The reason why Cantonese soy sauce became the most important, product in whole of China is because China supported industrialization of soy sauce in Guangdong province because it's close to the outside world. It could the soy sauce could be exported to Hong Kong, via Hong Kong to the rest of the world and to Southeast Asia. So all the rest, before that, before 49, the main soy sauce producing place is Shanghai, the Jiangnan region. But that changed totally after 49.
So soy sauce.
But I think to complete the circulation in terms of currency, none of that actually went to Beijing. What we need to figure out again is Philippines work. They sold whatever through Canton and Hong Kong. They took with that foreign currency what they needed to ship into China, not in the form of currency, but imports that they needed. Right? They didn't really collect the reservoir of foreign currency anywhere in China. They were bartering in Canton and Hong Kong.
So all these front companies in Hong Kong.
Which is why we didn't need an RMB. Right? It was no use for that.
Philippines also tell you about these goods that's smuggled across the border.
Which is why we seize all the time.
Yeah, but this sorry, Charles.
No. No. Just keep going. I'm enjoying the discussion.
But actually, I saw anecdotally a document indicating the smuggling pattern were also different along the east and west. So into Shenzhen is more nuanced. It's like more. So the common pattern was like the cross-border children, school children. Many teenagers they were smugglers. So what would they smuggle? It's actually cell phones. So they will smuggle cell phones, and the cell phone will be decompartmentalized, reassembled, and then export back to slum at the center of the world, the Chongqing Mansion, and then resold to basically the global south, mostly to South Asia. Whereas in Jiexi, I think that's on the West River, right? Like the other regions it could be more violent. So I saw even into the late 1990s, even to the 2000s, there were kind of syndicates using machine guns and the military camouflage confronting Chinese military police. 양경嗰度。
What we're talking about here, it's fascinating too, the regionalization. The East River system all the way along the coast to like Shantou and all that up to Shenzhen. That's actually a different river system than the West River system. That is, from Zhou-Special and to Shenzhen and then further out, then all those places, the smuggling will be much more violent. Whereas in the center of the Pearl River Delta, they're very civilized, I would say, in a very different world. But even if you talk about Huiyang and part of Dongguan in the East River system surrounding Shenzhen, historically, it's been known to have very, very violent. Whereas in the Pearl River Delta region, in the West River, it's just very different kind of smuggling. If you think about what Henry fought, right? I mean, that even in the 50s, he's done fishing, right? I mean, he commanded a whole fleet of boats to smuggle petrol and other goods needed by the Chinese government for the Korean War and all that. And so he, the Beijing government was extremely grateful, right, for these kind of so-called smugglers. But it's done in a very, very
patriotic way.
So I think if you really want to think about Shenzhen, think about it as a particular region with its own history and culture and societal infrastructure, as opposed to the further ones that is more violent, and then to the ones in the center, which is quote unquote civilized. So that itself in effect, if you think about contemporary period.
I think there was a question there, but can I first, maybe I want to read at least one question from people online, otherwise I don't want to completely get one. But we'll get to it, yeah. There's one question from Chen Guanlin, and the question is, thank you very much for the wonderful lecture, Professor Zhou. It is very inspiring. I'm very interested in the period when you demonstrated that many SOEs were highly involved in the Hong Kong dollar smuggling. According to your research, do you think these SOEs were the main conductors of the smuggling? How about other agents such as the businessmen and every lorry driver and lorry drivers that drive between Shenzhen and Hong Kong, that drove between Shenzhen and Hong Kong frequently? Moreover, do you think that these smuggled Hong Kong dollars played an important role in capital accumulation of the industries you mentioned?
Thank you, Guanlin, for the question. Definitely. So the most I think discussed case I didn't have time to discuss in detail was the smuggling case of the China Electronic Company Shenzhen branch. So allegedly, the party secretary of the company, he smuggled Hong Kong dollar and used that money to purchase parts, like electronic parts. And because of that, he was in prison. He was suspended and in prison. However, there are like disputes. So this is a military trained electric engineer. He disputed that he didn't pocket the money himself. So this is just like a response to unreasonable state policy. Without that, like without the smuggling, the company wouldn't work. Just to generate profit for the cooperative purpose. However, like in the end, he lost the job. But I think it's a good question. It's about like kind of the legal ambiguity of the early reform era, and definitely smuggling was a key source of capital accumulation at the time.
Maybe a final. We're already out of time, but final question. Yeah.
I'll be short. Like,
That's all right.
I really like thanks for like this is a fabulous, fascinating. Especially I see like this is a reverse kind of relationship. Like it's not straightforward like the commodity circulation is reverse. Like the circulation's commodity actually beget a process of reporting. Like I see that it's really interesting and insightful. I just got a very short questions that I pause all up. You mentioned in one slide, you mentioned that actually the Shenzhen government also participate in the black market to lend money to people, lend Hong Kong dollar to people. Right?
Yeah.
But that actually begets back to questions like, in order for this to happen, people must, let me put it this way, there should be a kind of audience or consumer that knowing Hong Kong dollar is available and they know and they want it, so that the lending could happen. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. So my question would then be, that actually kind of broader questions of how actually, if the Shenzhen government educated people, let them knowing that Hong Kong dollar is more valuable and as an indirect way of like recollecting the Hong Kong dollar, if there is any process of like that coming. So long story short, basically I'm asking like if the Shenzhen government educate people to know that like, Hong Kong dollar is valuable and they have to get it. You know what I mean?
Which period are you referring to, Charles? Is it like 50s or early?
So, but then that a process of questions of how do people know about what Hong Kong dollar valuable?
Oh.
But anyway.
It kind of appeared, right? The steps that you said they told that the Hong Kong dollar was more valuable because you can convert it into consumer goods.
Yeah.
That gets them to want to get Hong Kong dollars and create arbitrage opportunities that they did. But if you're talking about a period into the 80s, when there was more free movement of people, us going there and they're coming down, there's no education anymore because the border was not quite as solid. Then you know there's an arbitrage opportunity. Right?
The TV shows have some to do with it in Hong Kong TV. Movies, because the entire program can't catch Hong Kong television. It's all Hong Kong culture. And you can see that even in the houses, the internal designs of the houses in the 80s. When you walk into one, for the one who's making money, I mean, they look exactly like a TV, soap opera. Right? I mean, the stairs in the middle, the fish tank.
Fish tank.
And the language too. We change. If you think about police, the word in Hong Kong is and then in the Hong Kong television, that is usher. And then the language change, but the television is amazing. I mean, in terms of watching what kind of antennas households are in, whether then you can tell whether they are receiving signals from Hong Kong television or whether they're getting the broadcast. 1989, that was it's getting worse.
All the Hong Kong dollar bills. Shows, but it was burning. Was it burning? Markov. And the other one that I just found is 1991. It is in the lyrics of the songs that it is the Queen's.
Oh, the Queen's.
Space, motionless space that spells financial success.
Oh.
I think you sort of opened up not a can of worms, but opening up a really amazing channel.
I think Charles' question echoes John's question. So Charles asked about why the desirability of Hong Kong dollar, and John is asking like what's the problem with RMB, right? And I think also like the discussion, there's two things. One is the monetary dynamics, another is this consumer culture, economic sentiments. I learned so much.
I'm afraid we're out of time, but I think we can continue this discussion informally. But yeah, as we're out of time, please join me in thanking once again.
Thank you.
I'll be